Recording in progress.
Right. Good morning, members, and any members of the public that are watching on the live stream. My name is Councillor Harry Saville, and I'm the chair of the Council's Democratic Services Committee. This meeting will be live streamed and recorded and will be available for viewing after the meeting. Should the live streaming fail, the meeting will continue and a recording will be available through the Council's website following the conclusion of the meeting. As usual, translation facilities are available for those attending the meeting remotely, so please choose your language of choice, even on Zoom. We have carried out a translation check before the commencement of the live stream, so hopefully that will work correctly today. For those wishing to speak in the chamber, please raise your hand, and for those of you attending remotely, please can you use Zoom's raised hand function. For those of you that are attending remotely, please can you remember that not everyone in the chamber will be able to monitor the chat function on Zoom, so please bear that in mind. For those committee members that are attending remotely, please can you leave your camera on throughout the debate and especially when voting in order to maintain the integrity of the decision-making process. If you do need to leave the meeting temporarily, if you can pop a message in Zoom's chat function, one of the Democratic Services team or myself will spot it. And then if you can let us know when you return, that'd be great. As usual, we hope that people present and participating in this meeting will conduct themselves appropriately, be respectful to each other. That applies to members, officers, and anyone in the currently empty public gallery. When I open up the debate to members, I will ask committee members to speak and put their questions first, followed by non-committee members. Whilst, of course, we don't wish to stifle debate, can I remind members that all questions should be focused on the subject matter, and ideally, if we could try and avoid repetition where possible, that'd be appreciated. I will now move on to the main part of the agenda. So, item 1, apologies, Anne, you had your hand raised, I believe.
Yeah, Chair, it's just to apologise in advance. I seem to have a problem with my video this morning, so I can't get it to connect. So you can hear me but can't see me, so apologies.
Okay, Anne, thank you for that. I'm sure we can find some sort of workaround for that if needs be. Does your raised hand work? It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, if there's an issue, Anne, we will resolve that as and when we get to it, but thank you for flagging that up now. So that brings us to item 1 of the agenda, which is an appointment of vice chair. Do I have any nominations? I can see Councillor Chris Cater.
Bordar Pawb. Can I nominate Councillor Cathy Augustine for vice chair? I think she's been a really good vice chair to you, and I would just like to emphasise the hard work she's done on those subcommittees we had in the past 12 months. My goodness, the Constitution one and all the protocols and everything. It's been a lot of hard work, and her input's been really valuable. So if I could propose Cathy, please.
Okay, Chris, thank you. I've seen a flurry of hands go up, but I think I had Councillor Austin Roberts first. So, Austin.
Thank you
very much, Mr. Chair. I would like to second the nomination for Councillor Cathy Augustine as Vice Chair. As Councillor Chris Cater mentioned, she's a very able woman and she often can keep me in order in group meetings. So I would say that she is perfect as a Vice Chair for this meeting. Thank you.
Okay, Austin, thank you. Right, I said there'd been a flurry of hands. Are there any other proposals? No, I can't see any. Right, okay, can we have a show of hands, all those in favour? And can we have that on Zoom as well? I am happy that that is, well, that's going to be carried, isn't it? But can we have anyone against? And any abstentions? And I can't see any. Cathy, congratulations. Right. We will now move on to item 2. Apologies for absence. I'll hand over to Sally for this item.
No apologies, Chair.
Right, I can see you've got Sian online. Sian.
Councillor Sharon Dolman sent me a message this morning
that she has apologised, but she hasn't had an acknowledgement.
Okay, I can see that's been noted, so that
Thank
will
you.
go in the minutes. Sian, thank you for that. Okay, we'll move on to item 3, declarations of interest as always. Please can I remind you to declare both the existence and the nature of any interest. Can't see any hands up. Good. That brings us to item 4, urgent matters. Not aware of any. So, item 5, to approve and sign the minutes of the last meeting. So, our last meeting was on the 18th of March, 2024. Does anyone have any comments, observations? Nope. Okay, in that case, I'm happy to propose that they're correct record. Do I have a seconder? That's Councillor Cathy Augustine. So, can we have a show of hands that we are all happy that those minutes are correct record? Lovely. Do we have anyone against? And any abstentions? No. Okay, they are carried. Right. So this now brings us on to our next item, which is 6.1. So this is to consider a report by our Head of Democratic Services on feedback from our scrutiny self-assessment exercise. Members that participated in that will recall it took place earlier this year. It came off the back of the WLGA's peer review, which they've carried out recently in respect of this authority. So I will hand over to Sian to take us through the detail for the report, and then we'll discuss it. Sian.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As the Chair's just said, we had the 2 half-day self-assessment workshops which were facilitated by the WLGA. I have to say, very well attended by members, and both myself and Dawn and a couple of the committee officers were there. Really, really good discussion. And I think it's only right. I mean, the report sort of acknowledges that in 2022, when we had the local elections, we had such a huge turnover of councillors, and obviously it takes time for councillors to get into their various roles, including the scrutiny function, as being members of the scrutiny committees. And we'd picked up that during meetings, or definitely at the informal meetings of scrutiny chairs and vice chairs, you know, questions were being asked, comments were being made. Why do we do things like this? Why can't we do things like that? And that's absolutely right that the elected membership ask those questions. So with that in mind, plus as the chair says, the recommendation from the financial peer review, we had the two workshops. Members were split into groups, and there was 3 main questions that we put to the groups. One was the impact of scrutiny, so where is the value added? Are we looking at the right issues? So is it a clear selection criteria for topics? And are we doing it in the right way? Does scrutiny use the right methods of scrutiny? Paragraph 3.7 goes into a little bit more detail, but in summary, from the feedback that we pulled out, there does appear to be 2 main themes, and they're within paragraph 3.6. So the need for balance between pre and post scrutiny, so that members can evaluate the impact of scrutiny, measure its success, and identify whether the outcomes have been realised. And that would also provide tangible evidence for the annual scrutiny report that we are required to produce. And then also the use of more task and finish groups. I think members generally felt that there was a lack of in-depth reviews of some subjects. And then, as I say, 3-point summary gives a little bit more detail around the feedback that we had. Dawn was obviously here. Dawn's actually written this report, so I don't want to take up too much time because I want it to be more of a discussion amongst the committee. Because obviously the feeling that we got from those workshops was that councillors would welcome a formal review of our current arrangements. So that's why the report has been brought here. We do touch on it in the report, though, that at the same time, the WLGA have advised local authorities that Welsh Government have now approved a proposal to progress work that seeks to improve scrutiny within local government. And there are plans to hold a conference in the autumn to support showcasing and sharing best practice and to consider methods of scrutiny in practice to ascertain whether they're still fit for purpose. So the dilemma really, when we were talking about it, was, do we do our own scrutiny review now, or do we hold off, participate in this national review and see whether it will add to or be in line with our thoughts, etc. My only concern is, having lived through 2 previous national reviews of scrutiny, they do take an incredible amount of time. And the feeling that I had from the workshop was that this is something that you as a council want to look at now. So really, over to you. Like I say, Dawn can answer any questions if you've got any detailed questions about the workshops that we had, but otherwise very much open to members and what the options are there in the report. We've put them under paragraph 4.1 and 4.2. Do you want to wait for the Welsh Government to progress its work to improve scrutiny within local government? Or do members want to request council to undertake a review of the scrutiny prior to that Welsh Government review? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sian, I was going to say, do we have anyone who wants to comment, ask a question? I can see Councillor Sue Shotter's already got a hand up. So, Sue.
Thank you very much, Chair. And can I just thank you for this report, Sian and Dawn. It really was interesting. It was a brilliant day. I found it really beneficial. I personally would like to see option 2 come forward, but I also feel, which is the members' request council to take a brief scrutiny, but I also feel that the Welsh Government are in progress of actually doing one, which I think is really important. I'm just wondering if we can wait till the autumn, see what comes back from the Welsh Government, and then it comes back to members so that we can review and then take a proper look at what Welsh Government are offering. As you've said, Sian, you've been here twice before, and it is a long process. We want this to work, so maybe what we can do is take ideas forward and then work on those if that's possible. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, just some feedback from the meeting. I've had one initial meeting with the WLGA, and it's very early discussions, but they anticipate that they want to hold a conference in the autumn. So with your proposal, that might fit in quite nicely, because the main themes coming out, because we are in very, very initial discussions, the lack of resources for scrutiny was high on the agenda. And we did stress the point, obviously, members of the scrutineers, that you have to involve them in this process. So I know there's going to be meetings with heads of democratic services, monitoring officers, and obviously there will be this conference. So I assume there'll be members' involvement at that stage, but I haven't got much else to feedback. But obviously with your, what you're suggesting, Sue, that might fit in nicely.
Chair, may I come back in? Thank you very much. Could I then make a recommendation, Chair? Because at the end of the day, this is what the recommendation is asking, that we put something forward. Would that be?
Of course, go on.
Thank you very much. My recommendation is that we wait to see what comes out of the Welsh Government review, and it comes back to this committee so that we can look at all the evidence that Dawn and Sian have been able to gather, and we can review it with looking at maybe option 2, or even if Welsh Government have been forward thinking, we could be up and running and taking it forward. But I think it's really important that we don't allow this to sort of go along with what has happened in the past, through no fault of officers, of course. It's just the procedure. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Sue, thank you. I can see we've just had a flurry of hands, so just that everyone knows they're in line at some point, and I'm sorry, it's just been another flurry of hands. Well, look, next we'll have Councillor Chris Cater, and then Gwenol, and then Chris Hughes, and then just because I can see some of you still have your hands up. We've got David Carr, Austin Roberts, Paul Lucock, Kathy Augustine, and then Gronwy Edwards. So for all of you that have got your hands up, don't worry, I will get to you. Just before I bring Chris in, I just do want to double check. We've got a proposal from Sue, which, tell me if I'm wrong, but effectively we wait until it comes off Welsh Government review, and then we look at what comes out of that along with our own findings, and we make a decision at that point. When do we think we might get some sort of feedback from Welsh Government? Is it going to be shortly after this conference, or might it be later? Okay.
Sorry, just to respond to that, we have absolutely no idea, and that is my only concern, is that the Welsh Government may take a while to undertake a review.
I'll bring Sue back in. Sue.
Thank you, Chair. Dawn, you said that you've been given verbal indications that it's going to be autumn. I think it's really important that we're kept up to date on this. So if that doesn't actually materialise, I think we should be informed that autumn, that anything that you're given to indicate when this meeting is going to happen, because what I don't want to see is us all back here in 12 months' time with no discussion, no way forward on what we want to do, to make sure that scrutiny actually works for us as a council. So I think it's really important that we do wait for Welsh Government, but we give them a time limit. If this hasn't been reviewed in maybe 4 to 6 months, or you haven't had enough feedback to know when there is a date, then maybe we come back and we look at maybe option 2, if members are happy for that. That added on to my recommendation, Chair.
Okay, Sue, that is great. Thank you. Right, I'll pass over to Councillor Chris Cater. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. I feel quite privileged to be at the top of that long list of speakers. Anyway, I just want to, I really welcome this report, and it's interesting, 3.5, it does flag up that question, does scrutiny use the right methods of scrutiny? And it brings in the sort of smart approach, specific, measurable, assignable, realistic and time bound. And I think that really should be an important part of scrutiny. As a cabinet member, I wasn't involved in the workshop, which was a pity. But yeah, I think really that's come out of those workshops from what I can see. We need to get value for money as well. Officers' time is a resource that is limited and might be restricted further in the future, and I think we need to be quite clear about that this can't be even more officer resource intensive. We need to there has to be efficiency in this, and we have to get the best procedure. At the moment, I think local area forums are, or at least our one in Llandudno. I know you're the chair, so I'm buttering you up a little bit, Councillor Harry, but I think we do scrutinise local issues, and I think that does work very well. And I think there is improvements that could be made to make that even more effective locally. So I just would like fellow members to just think about the resource issues, because we are heading towards another big deficit that we're going to have to tackle, and we have to bear that in mind. But I'd be quite happy to support Councillor Sue and second her proposal with that time limit, because I don't think this could be left open-ended. We need to sort this out if we're going to make those smart improvements. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Chris. I was just having a conflab with Dawn. I think what I'm not clear about is, yes, that Dawn has had information to say that there will be a conference in the autumn. In my mind, a conference isn't a review. So I imagined that after the conference, there would be some formal Welsh Government-led review of the scrutiny function. I could be wrong. And maybe all they're doing is a light touch. It's a conference. They get feedback on best practice, what works in other local authorities, and that's fed back to local authorities. So I think until we get clarification on that, we are a little bit it's a bit of the unknown. But I think what Councillor Sue Shotter is saying, that if we then put a time limit on that feedback from Welsh Government, it would help us then. Because what I wouldn't want to happen is a conference in the autumn, which then leads to a formal review by Welsh Government, which then keeps us waiting for what could be quite a long time. That was my concern. So.
Also, what I'll do, I'll contact the WLGA to say that we've obviously had this report. We're thinking of doing a review, and I'll see whether they've got some sort of timeline they can share with us now they've been feeding back to Welsh Government. So that may well help.
Okay, right. I'll hand over to Gwenol next. Gwenol.
Diolch, Cadeirydd.
Thank you, Chair. I would also like to say the same as Councillor Sue Shotter, that I really appreciated the opportunity to be part of the workshops, and I really benefited from it, discussing the things we do well and the things we could improve on. As the chair of the Education and Skills Scrutiny Committee, we do have to remember that committee has been assessed by Estyn, and we had a review of our work by Estyn, and before that inspection we had to do a self-assessment of what we did already, and there was a lot of preparations for that. So we were fairly confident that we were doing our work well, but then Estyn came in and confirmed that the work of the Education and Skills Scrutiny Committee is a good example of how to scrutinise, and we received confirmation from them that the work we do is good, and I'm sure it's possible to use that activity as a template of how to scrutinise on a different committee. It was hard work, very hard work for Dawn and Sian, but it was worth doing, and we are confident now that the way we work is good and has been recognised as good example by Estyn. So I'm certain, I know it costs money, but I also know it's worthwhile doing. So that's my contribution. Thank you very much.
Right, we'll go to Councillor Chris Hughes online.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know whether this is a help or a hindrance, but I have guess the benefit of hindsight of being involved in the former committee system. I think I'm probably, alongside Gronwy, the only member left that is involved in the previous committee system, and I was involved in the working groups and project groups that set up the current scrutiny, or scrutiny as it was back in 2004 when it first came into existence. That time we had 8 scrutiny committees and we had working groups, and every time we've reviewed scrutiny has been reduced, cut, been the area in which we have where we have sought to find efficiencies. During one efficiency, we went from having working groups, which there were a lot of, to working on a more project board base. So whereas members dominated, backbench members dominated the working groups, the project boards are dominated in the main by cabinet members. So we didn't effectively make it more efficient. We just changed the balance of power to a degree, and I do feel that anything that seeks to reduce further the impact and input from scrutiny we will have gone, we'll be doing about 70-80% less than what scrutiny was doing when it was first introduced. And I do feel that we don't have the input that as backbenchers, and having, I served as both a cabinet member and a backbencher, and I certainly don't feel that we have as much impact today. When we tend to end up discussing things, I mean, particularly think of finance and resources scrutiny, the discussions go on forever, but we never actually get into the detail of the specifics because we're always talking about half a dozen or more items on an agenda, which you can not really get into the detail of. So it does concern me that the focus of each review that we've had has been on, in my view, reducing the role of scrutiny rather than making it more effective. That having been said, I do agree with what Councillor Sue said earlier. I think it's really important that we understand what Welsh Government are doing, because as they have done in the past, they do have the ability to impose what they choose to do on us. And they've done that in the past in terms of of a number of different things. So I just feel that we need to be conscious of the fact that each time we review scrutiny, we do reduce the amount of scrutiny that goes on, and it is significantly less than it used to be when we first introduced the system of scrutiny. Thanks, Chair.
Chris, thank you. David Carr, online.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of the points I was going to make have been made by Councillor Chris Hughes. It's absolutely right. When we changed from the committee system, or mostly all over the country, it went to a cabinet system, the whole point of scrutiny was to scrutinise what the cabinet are doing. Now, as Chris said, over the years, scrutiny has declined in this authority. The amount of scrutiny committees we had originally has been reduced and reduced. I think this report is talking about streamlining, talking about time management. What we're going to get is councillors having less of a say. At the moment, I think a lot of the problems with this council, and identified if you go and speak to residents, we're not happy with the cuts in frontline services, is that decisions are taken by too few people. Too few people take all the decisions in this council. And I think really we should keep the status quo at the very least. I think we shouldn't be streamlining scrutiny. I mean, I went to the social services and health scrutiny committee last week, and there was a very important report about safeguarding. The lead officer, the chief executive, and the portfolio didn't even bother to attend. They had more important things to do. And I think people just expect scrutiny now just to vote things through. And there was a debate on it, and I'm quite welcome the fact that we do have debates on things. And then there's the issue of the toilets that was never actually ever discussed until it was discussed in the Finance and Resources Scrutiny Committee last Monday. Things are just sort of not getting through. And our residents are asking us, we're having big changes in this county, particularly, as I said again, about the cuts in frontline services. And my residents are asking me, can you do something about this? And I said, well, I do my best. But the thing is, these decisions seem to be taken before we can actually have any kind of discussion or debate on them. So I'm against the watering down of the scrutiny committees. So I think the only option, don't get a vote on this committee. So, but if I was going to vote, I'd vote to keep the status quo, really, because I think as Chris said, that scrutiny is very important, particularly to the residents and particularly to councillors to have their say. So no, I don't want to see sort of time management and a more streamlined scrutiny, because what that means is less say, yet more power in the hands of fewer people. Thank you.
I think I'll just come in and respond to some of the points made by both Councillor David Carr and Councillor Chris Hughes. I would be surprised if Council agreed to review scrutiny function with the purpose of reducing its effectiveness or watering it down in any way. Personally, I don't think that's the aim of any type of review. I think the points under paragraph 3.7 clearly recognise what currently works well in Conway County Borough Council, but there is a list there of areas for improvement, and I think any focus of the review should look at those potential areas for improvement. It is about improving the scrutiny function, making it effective, and not to reduce it or water it down in any way, in my opinion.
Okay, right, we'll move on to our next speaker, Councillor Austin Roberts. Austin.
I no longer need to speak because all I was going to do was second Councillor Sushot's recommendation.
Diolch, Austin. In that case, Councillor Paul Lucock in the back. Paul.
Thanks, Chair. Any scrutiny methodology and levers we have are only as good as what we as councillors do. We have to participate in all the fora that are there, and we have to ask questions. And when our questions are not satisfactorily answered, we use topic sheets, we use questions to cabinet members, and I tend to use whatever lever I can to have some influence on whatever's happening. My concern is that the points that have been raised this morning are the significant ones. Very sadly, I often look at things we're debating and discussing now from the eyes of a Section 114 commissioner and think, is this bit of expenditure or this bit of activity, would this be supported by a Section 114 commissioner? And on scrutiny, I don't know what their position is. We'd have to look at what they decided in the local authorities where they've intervened. But it is a worry to me where we apply our resources and whether that in the present time where local authorities' roles are becoming less just because UK and Welsh government don't allocate taxpayers' money to us. We cut more services, even though we increase council tax. In that sort of context, I'm also wondering whether we shouldn't, yes, further look at it, but at least ensure at the present time that we don't do less scrutiny. But my worry is, I mean, I have frustrations in a number of committees because I don't think they're dealing with either the right issues or in the right detail. But that is dependent on all of us. And let me be frank, out of all our councillors, I think we've got 55, haven't we? I do worry about the participation and the questioning of some councillors through the scrutiny procedure. I don't think participation is great enough, and I don't think questioning is strong enough, interrogating the detail enough. Some committees I go along, most councils just come along and say, good report, well done. Not most, but a significant number. And that makes me very uncomfortable. I think there is still far too much complacency. And I would like to see more councillors participating, interrogating the detail. And then when we do get things wrong, and we do get things wrong, we can be more confident that we did the work beforehand. And I'm not sure we always do the work beforehand to ensure that we get the best outcomes.
Okay, Paul, thank you for that. We've had a couple more hands up, so just to members know where we are, we've got Councillor Cathy Augustine next, then Gronwy Edwards, Cheryl Carlisle, then Anne McCaffrey. So, Cathy, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. At the risk of annoying Councillor Paul, I'd like to start by saying good report, well done. I really enjoyed the process, so thank you for allowing us that time. I think Sian is absolutely right in saying she gets the feeling that members would like some swift actions. I am aware that there is going to be a Welsh Government supported conference in the autumn. I've had one really poor experience of this kind of thing where I went 2 years ago to the All Wales Anti-Racist Action Plan launch in Cardiff, which was an all singing, all dancing conference for an entire day with probably 150 people there. I have heard nothing since. That may be a shockingly bad example, but we do know that anything at this level, Welsh Government, local government, WLGA, can drag on for an awfully long time. So I welcome Councillor Sue's suggestion that we hold to account through some kind of timescale. One of the things I would like to challenge is Councillor Carr and a little bit Councillor Chris Hughes. I got no feeling from the actual exercise or the report that this was about watering down our scrutiny, but making it much more robust. And there were two pieces that I actually thought were really important. So that officers' recommendations to scrutiny committees are smart. Now, some of them already are, very much so, but if we made that more consistent, that shouldn't really add to officers' work because they kind of should be doing that anyway. And then it makes everything more robust in terms of evaluation. We did talk about an evaluation document, so that would be covering specific metrics of success. Now, surely having clear metrics is transformative. We're talking about transformation quite often. How do we change things to work smarter? So I think having very clear metrics, and we did also talk about a comms plan in that evaluation document. So I think that would mitigate a lot of issues that we've had recently. So smart objectives help with certainly post-scrutiny, follow-ups to committees, to scrutiny committees later on in however many months. And I think that delivering on those two suggestions will allay the fears of any councillors who think this review is about watering down our scrutiny. I think it will make it much more robust. Our local area forums are being reconstituted, so can also take on perhaps some of the burden, as Councillor Chris Hughes mentioned. So really, my point is, I will get to it, we could actually bring some existing best practice to bear and ensure that that is spread across all our scrutiny committees. So it doesn't negate Councillor Sue's proposal. I'm just saying that bearing in mind how long Welsh Government can take, I know that Dawn will try and hold them to a timeline. I also fear that that will slip. So while we have best practice that we can draw on, I'm wondering if we can make it more consistent across all our scrutiny committees to ensure that any officer's recommendations do contain that evaluation document that covers specific metrics of success. So this could be, for example, current service costs and what the planned savings are, current demographics of service users with a plan to broaden that, an increase in community engagement, etc., plus this detailed communications plan we mentioned for all stakeholders. So that exists in a lot of reports, but not all of them. So my proposal would be that we spread that out as best practice in the meantime, while we pursue option 2, bearing in mind we're going to look for a timescale from Welsh Government. So a few caveats there, but I hope you followed my thinking. Thank you.
Kathy, thank you for that. Before we go on, we've already got a proposal, so I'll ask Sue and Chris, are they reasonably happy with what Kathy's suggested?
Can I just have a little bit of feedback before I add? Actually, I think it is an excellent proposal, but I just want a bit of feedback off Sian, if possible, just to see how this would mould in with our reports.
I think Councillor Cathy's comments are very valid. There is good practice already there, depending on where the report is coming from and which committee it's going to. So I don't think that there would be any objection whatsoever if that went forward as a recommendation to council, in as much as we make improvements based on our current good working practice, so that it is consistent across scrutiny committees.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that little bit of feedback. Councillor Cathy, I think this is a solid, fantastic, good idea to add on to the recommendation. I think we're doing a little bit of something before the report comes from the Welsh Government, and hopefully by the time we actually have our meeting, which will encase all this, we will have moved on a little bit ourselves. So thank you so much. I'm very happy, Chair, to add that on.
Sue, thank you. Chris, you second. I can see a thumbs up, so that's good. Right, so we'll come back to the proposal in a wee bit. I'll go to Gronwy Edwards in the chamber. Gronwy.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm not on the committee, obviously. And yes, and Chris touched on the fact that scrutiny is a relatively new process. Going back to the days when we had committees, and going back to the days prior to the county being formed, when we just had a borough with different responsibilities before we inherited education and social services, decision-making process was much simpler because obviously we had far less influence. Now that we have education and social services, which at the end of the day is 70% of our budget, and most of it is statutory, it means that actually our decision-making process is extremely limited. The only ones we really have influence on are the minor services that are very important to the ratepayers, obviously, more important than many of the things in the larger services. But those are the only ones we can really influence when it comes to doshing out the money, basically. And that's what it's coming down to as we're going into this next budget round, is how we're going to survive as an authority and deliver the services that the residents out there expect. So decision-making process has to be swift, it has to be decisive, and it has to be efficient. So I don't think it's anything to do about watering down the responsibility of scrutiny. I think scrutiny is just as important as ever. And we scrutinised in those days of committees, we scrutinised even more in the days of we are now. But we have to concentrate more on what we can actually have an influence on, rather than talk round and round about things that really we have very little influence on. But I think that is important. We are talking about transformation. Policies are the policies set down by government, and we are influenced and hamstrung by those policies in what we can actually effectively change. So I think we have to bear that in mind when we spend an awful lot of time talking around things, when we can't really have much influence. So we have to concentrate the next 12 months, particularly the next 6 months, on the here and now, and how we effectively move forward to ensure that we avoid a 114 if possible. It's going to be challenging, and we will have to take very decisive decisions based on what we know. And I think Paul said quite a lot. We need to come to these, whether it be cabinet or scrutiny, with the right questions. So we need to have done our research before we come to those scrutiny meetings, not just leave it to the scrutiny meeting itself or to the cabinet. We have to do our work prior to that and ask those questions. I very much favour, and I've said this for many years, the system that the Parliament has of having select committees to drill down into really difficult areas. And I think those can be more effective than having workshops and different formats. So I think we have to be very decisive. I'm surprised by the lack of members that come to cabinet. Cabinet people say we don't really have an influence, and decision is made by a few. Well, a very few people actually come to cabinet, which is very surprising, really. If there's so much concern, why don't members come to cabinet and ask the questions? Because I'm sure the leader is very accommodating, and the door is always open. So I think we need to be not worrying too much about the process, but more about the effectiveness of what we're doing.
Gronwy, thank you. Right, we'll go to Councillor Cheryl Carlisle online. Cheryl.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for letting me speak as I'm not on this committee. Yes, I really welcome what Councillor Gromway excuse me, has just said about the importance of scrutiny, and also I agree about the attendance at Cabinet. As someone who very rarely misses Cabinet, I would really welcome lots more members of scrutiny to attend Cabinet meetings. Just touching on a couple of points, I'd like to assure Councillor Chris, given the volume of work coming to FROSC, then extra meetings are going to be put on. I'm a little concerned he feels unable to get into the detail of proposals, but I'm aware he hasn't been able to make several FROSC meetings, but lots of other members do dig down into the detail in FROSC. Scrutiny is absolutely vital. The toilets issue shows just that. And I can assure members that the next budget setting meeting in the new year is going to be a single item agenda, and we are going to go over every area of concern in that budget. I can assure members that. And I'd like every Cabinet member to be present and give a summary of the impacts of each portfolio and service. That's vital. We need to know from them the impact of what's actually happening. Councillor Paul spoke very eloquently about more detailed scrutiny, and obviously I'd welcome more detail from Cabinet members around the financial implications and impacts of decisions that they ultimately make. And I'd just like to thank everyone that's taken part in producing this report. And yes, scrutiny, you would expect that from the Chair of FROSC, but scrutiny is vital, and I really welcome, any review and to take on good practice from everywhere. Thank you. Diolch.
Okay, Cheryl, thank you. Our last speaker I've got at the moment is Councillor Anne McCaffrey, and then we'll come to our proposal. Anne.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm sorry my camera's still not working. I think there's been a lot of common sense spoken this morning. I think we're all in agreement that scrutiny is vital, and strengthening it, not weakening it, is our challenge. I mean, for me, I think timing is also really important. We're halfway through this term, this administration's term, and I think when we hit the new financial year, we'll be 2 years down to go. So for me, I think it's really important that we make whatever improvements we can. And today we've just, highlighted a number of them. I'd probably highlight a couple more and I'll come back to that. But I don't see why we can't effect our changes, which would be not particularly difficult to do before the new financial year, so that we can hit the next 2 years running. Where would I like to see it strengthened? I think I would like to see a more cohesive scrutiny group. And by that, I mean a group that's got a bit of common vision in terms of understanding what reports we want, and also what reports that we need, and what reports that are in front of us. And, at the minute, we are just summoned and asked to attend on a certain day. There is no pre-meet, whereas in previous times we started to do a pre-meet. That meant that we were far more focused when it came to the actual scrutiny meeting itself. And, if we were to invite, for example, the Cabinet member, lots of the disparate phone calls that may well be made by each and some of us to whether it's officers taking up a lot of their time, could be potentially answered, and you would get more of a common vision about what we're being asked to make recommendations about. So I think inclusivity could be strengthened. I think our cohesiveness could be strengthened. I think if we had more ownership, or the ability to have ownership of our forward work plan, it would feel more adult, and we'd feel more responsible for delivering it. And I think it's really important that the relationship between the Cabinet member and the scrutiny the Cabinet member and the scrutiny committee, if it were strengthened, it very much could be the conscience of the Cabinet member around the area. For example, it was finance and resources. It means therefore lots of things could be perhaps ironed out, thrashed out, and therefore reports be more able to hit the ground and be focused and scrutinised in a focused way. So the big thing for me is, why don't we actually build on the best practice that we've had and I think Councillor Chris referenced it a few minutes into the meeting, which is we could set up our own working group and we could actually just hoover up our best practices and our good ideas with a view to implementing them for the new financial year. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Anne, thank you for that. Right, so I think we've got to the end of our discussion at this stage. Sue and Chris and Kathy will correct me if I'm wrong, but at this stage we have a proposal, so we'll vote on that. If that doesn't pass, we can then look at other proposals. So the proposal, as I understand it, is that at this stage now, officers begin looking at ensuring we have smart recommendations across all of our committee reports that go to scrutiny. I'm looking at Sian as well. Sian's nodding. Fantastic. So we ensure that that is consistently implemented across all scrutiny committee reports. We wait to see what the outcome of this Welsh Government initiated conference is in the autumn, and then we can take stock from there as to whether or not we want to consider further a further review or further changes. And central to all of this is a recommendation to full council at this stage. So this isn't a decision we're taking today. This is our recommendation. So that's the proposal we've got. I can see Sue, Chris and Kathy nodding their heads, so I trust that's correct. Before we take a vote on it, I can see that Councillor Anne McCaffrey has a hand up online, so I will go over to Anne quickly. Anne.
Yeah, it's just a quick, we've talked a lot this morning about smart objectives, smart recommendations, smart decisions. It seems to me that we could be smarter with this recommendation that we've just put forward to vote on. And that could be that we put a timescale on this so that we implement everything that we want to do by the new financial year. And I don't think that's just limited to Sian looking at making smarter reports. I think there's some other things. So I'd like to see a smart recommendation coming out of our discussion this morning.
Yes, thank you, Anne. The bit about timescale had actually come into my mind. I suppose that the concern I have is we have our next meeting of this committee in November, which one would hope this conference would have taken place by then and we might have a steer by that point. But in all fairness, it may not have taken place by then. I suppose November is still the autumn to many people. Our next meeting after that is March, which strikes me as probably a little bit too late. So I had an idea in my mind, which I haven't shared with Sian Williams yet. She probably won't like this, but perhaps that depending on when that conference takes place, we maybe could look at moving that November meeting back a little bit if needs be, or potentially we could have an additional meeting. But look, I'm very conscious of the input that requires from our staff, so I'd prefer to not make any promises at this stage without having had a proper discussion with them. But I do certainly take the point about timescale into consideration. I'll hand over to Sian quickly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We will make it fit. Obviously, the Democratic Services Committee meeting in November is scheduled so that you can consider the IRPW report, which has to be done at a certain time of year. But I think in terms of a proposal, a recommendation coming from this committee to council to encompass what everybody is trying to say, maybe it's something along the lines of we hold off undertaking a formal review within Conway County Borough Council until we get feedback from the national conference in the autumn time, whenever that may be. In the meantime, we look to introduce best practice that already exists with some committees across all committees, particularly around the information that's included within the report, so smart recommendations and the other things that Councillor Kathy touched on. If by the time we haven't had feedback, or if the conference indeed hasn't been held, by the time we next meet in November time, we look to we seek a formal steer from this committee as to whether it wants to undertake its own formal review. So then at least we can then meet the suggestion from Councillor Anne in terms of trying to get something in place by the start of the next financial year.
Anne, is that all okay?
Yeah, good compromise as long as we can not lose sight of the deadline for us. Yeah, thanks, Chair.
Point taken. I'll bring in Kathy as well. Kathy.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Anne, for tightening that all up, which was obviously the intention, talking about smart objectives. We've also talked about resources. If necessary, thank you everyone for re-electing me as Vice Chair, and in that capacity, I would be very happy to help with research through previous reports to pick out what is best practice. I also don't want to lose sight of the fact that I did mention a comms plan being part of that, because that could have mitigated a lot of issues we've seen over the summer and more recently. Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Kathy. I think what you're talked about will work or feed really well. We have got 3 dates in the diary now for training for officers in terms of report writing. What to include, for what information elected members require to make informed decisions, and I think if we make sure that that covers recommendations and smart objectives, so it would be good if we could find some good examples to pass on to those officers as part of their training day. And yes, I fully appreciate the comment about the comms plan. Personally, I don't think we need anything separate because we have a public participation strategy which does put an onus on us to communicate better with the public around our scrutiny committees. It also includes the expectations of what elected members are required to do. So I think that's a conversation that we can have with the chair and the vice chair and the chairs and the vice chairs of the scrutiny committees in terms of how do we now communicate what is on your forward work plans to members of the public. You're very aware of what's contentious and what is of high public interest. So I think that's a step that we can take forward in any event.
Rightio. So we'll take a vote on the proposal. I trust we're all happy with what we're voting on. So can we have a show of hands, all those in favour, please? Okay, and can we have anyone against? And any abstentions? Okay, that is carried unanimously. So, members, thank you for that. Now, this brings us on to our next report, which is an update on member training and development, specifically attendance figures and rates for members participating in training that's made available to them. So I will hand over to Sian and then we will discuss the contents of the report. Sian.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So that this report is as the Chair says, an update report. It's something that we agreed last year to keep everybody up to date in terms of the training plan and its effectiveness, really. If you recall that in July last year, you recommended to Council that certain training modules become mandatory for elected members, and those are listed in paragraph 3.1. I would just like to clarify some of those areas. So all of the mandatory training modules actually do form part of the members' induction programme, but obviously the learning modules then provide more meat on the bone, more information for you as elected members. I'd also just to clarify, because this is a public report and I don't want anybody to misinterpret the contents of the report. Elected members have always been required to undertake code of conduct training following their elections, and I can, you know, say for certain that all members have completed the training at some point in their term of office. So just to clarify that the figures that are shown in the appendix in terms of the code of conduct training is just that training that has happened this last year. I wouldn't want anybody to think that any of our members have not undertaken code of conduct training. In addition, the safeguarding training, really important, and this was identified as mandatory training some years ago, and it forms part of the Corporate Safeguarding Action Plan. And just to explain that the safeguarding training is delivered in a variety of ways. It isn't just the e-learning module. So again, the figures that are listed in the appendix are those councillors that have completed the training via the e-learning module, which we know isn't the easiest platform to navigate. But I can confirm that all 55 elected members have undertaken the basic mandatory requirement during their term of office. But the Corporate Safeguarding Action Plan also requires elected members to complete basic safeguarding refresher training every 5 years. So obviously there's this rolling programme then for elected members. The report actually says that 9 members need to undertake the refresher training. Pleased to report that 2 have during the time that I have completed this report. So that's down to 7 members now needing to undertake the refresher training. But we are trying to continually monitor that, because obviously there will be other people coming to the end of the 3-year time frame as well. And then cybersecurity, that was identified as mandatory for all elected members and our co-opted members. So not only did we have we have got the e-learning module, but we also delivered a session via our Member Development and Information Forum. And that was there was officers from Welsh Government that attended that session to go through the cybersecurity issues, etc., and how important it is for elected members to understand the issues now that we live in this digital age. So there were 17 members that attended the Member Development and Information Forum, in addition to the e-learning module that's in the appendix. In terms of all lay members, really good completion rates, but their training module sat on a different platform. It was called the Matobo platform. That no longer exists. So there are 2 outstanding lay members that need to complete the training, and we're hoping to capture them just before the next Standards Committee meeting so that we can talk through how they access it through the training platform that we use for elected members. They have tried but failed, and the reason why it was removed from the Matobo platform was that Welsh Government withdrew the funding, so it had to come off that platform. So no fault of their own, really. And then just to make you aware that the Equalities training module is currently off our e-learning platform. It hasn't been there since the beginning of August. So corporate training are trying to source another offer to replace it. In the meantime, they will be doing some seminars. So I'll circulate details of those for elected members if they can attend one of those. I think that's the additional issues that I wanted to pick up. But just also to touch on the fact, you know, I think attendance at Member Development and Information Forum has been far better this term than in previous terms. Hopefully that's because the subjects that are coming before members are something that they are very interested in, and hence increase in attendance figures. And I've listed there just so that you have an understanding in 3.8 of I haven't included obviously everything, all the updates from the cabinet members, all the updates from the member champions, but specifically listed under paragraph 3.8 there were areas of what I would consider to be member development opportunities. And then we recognising as well that we need to get better. The e-learning platform isn't the easiest platform to get data from in terms of recording who has done what. So we will try and improve on that. And also we have just got into the swing of things in as much as when you attend a training event, we have digitalised the feedback form. So it's far easier for you to provide feedback to us in terms of how beneficial you found the training and whether it's something that should be an ongoing offer or whether actually no, didn't really add anything to my role as elected member. And then just at the end of last week, we circulated the survey to all elected members asking for feedback in terms of informing your future training and development plan. But the figures are there. I would also mention as well, because some of them look very poorly attended, some of them were very focused training. So for example, if you see a 1 next to something, there was a couple of training sessions that were specifically for the chair of licensing, obviously a very important committee that needs specific training. Some of the training was targeted specifically for cabinet members. And there was also, I think what some members have done, which is absolutely great, once they've gone onto the e-learning platform, they've seen things that don't form part of the mandatory training package, but they've actually gone on to do other things that are of interest of them. And there's quite a few of those listed there, which is why it only looks like only one, well, because only one person has done it, but they've done it off their own back.
Cool. Right. Okay, Sean, thank you for that. So that wraps up Sean's presentation, comments. Members, would anyone like to say anything? I've got Councillor Sue Shotter in the chamber. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, for that. And thank you, Sean, for the update. I'm full of training. You know, training comes, I put my name down and I really am proactive. To be honest with you, I am a face-to-face learner. I like to do training that way because I find it very frustrating to go online to the e-learning, get kicked off, go in again. I have just checked my training to see what I've done, and none of my training's down. I have done the cybersecurity, I've done the modern A slavery, I've done the general data regulations, I've done the group A safeguarding, and none of it's down in my training, even though I have actually sent off my certificates to the officers. But the thing is, like you said, there are more options to get there, but you go into the training, you learn it. What I've actually had to do is take screenshots of my certificates because it's impossible to send it off to the office to prove that I've actually done this when you've worked hard to do it, because it does take quite a long time to do this training. You don't do it in half an hour. This could be 4, 5 days, even 6 days, because it is a constant learning, and that's just for one subject. So it's a bit disheartening when you do it all and then you get kicked out, and then all of a sudden you think to yourself, how am I going to start again? When I could maybe go in a group meeting, have a bit of discussion, a talk about it, learn probably a lot more. I know, as Chris has already, Councillor Chris Kate has already said about finances, and we've got to make sure that, you know, financially we look at this in the right manner, and having it online is amazing. But for me personally, I also think it's really important to maybe bolster it up with a face-to-face meeting if officers and members could attend. There's no point doing it if members aren't going to attend. It's a complete waste of everybody's time. You know, I mean, when we did our last bit of training, I was really disappointed by the amount of members that actually turned up. I thought it would have been nicer to see a lot more of us there because it was just so informative, and it wasn't just, sorry to go on, Chair, it wasn't just about being in the meeting and sitting there. it was about getting information, getting ideas forward. You know, Councillor Cathy, I had Councillor Sharon Dolman on my table, I had Councillor Gwenol, and it was all really informative, educational things that we were talking about. I took away with me and I thought, okay, I'm going to work with that. So it's not just all about sitting on your own, picking up a bit of training. I think it's really important that it's done in an environment that suits us. And members development is brilliant, but I've always thought as members development as not so much training and more of a getting information and learning a few things, but it's not real getting to the nitty-gritty. Thank you very much, and thank you for all being so patient with me.
No, Sue, thank you for those comments. Is there anyone else? Okay, I can't see that we've got anyone else. Yes. So, well, I'll tell you what, before we come to the recommendations in the report, I'll bring Councillor Austin Roberts. Austin.
Yeah, just faswn i'n hoffi
I would like to propose that we go with the recommendation in the report.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you, Austin. I was going to suggest something similar. So I'm happy to second that. So the proposal we've got is the recommendation in the report, which is that we note the information and that additional information is shared with group leaders on their group members' attendance at training, so they can obviously take that up with their own group members. So that's been proposed by Austin, seconded by me. I can't see any hands up anywhere, so we'll go to a vote. Can we have all those in favour, please? Yeah, can we, just for completeness, of anyone against and any abstentions? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Members, thank you. That brings us to the end of today's meeting. So I think the only thing to bear in mind is we are next scheduled to meet at 10 on Monday, the 11th of November. So look forward to seeing you all then. Thank you.
Thank you.